Fang Deck Tech.
Hello everybody, welcome back to One Intellect. This is a channel where we play Flesh and Blood. Today we're diving into a Fang deck tech video. So it's going to be a different format than what we normally do. So far we've only put out Armory videos where we've been showing people play at our local armories. But this is going to be a little bit more of a structured, more intentional video. We're going to walk through my Fang deck that I've used for quite a long time now. I'm going to go over the history, how I went about building the deck, and just the theme and mindset I went into when building this deck. So, first, I want to talk about the history I've had with this deck that I've been using. I've had a good handful of Armory wins, even straight wins throughout the Armory. Now that's a mixed bag. Some people are trying out new decks or they're playing out not their competitive decks. So take that with a grain of salt. Everyone's doing something at an Armory for a different purpose. But some other people are also testing out competitive decks. So there's that. But I also took this deck to Worlds in Philadelphia, where again I had some pretty decent results. For the Battle Hardened, I went with 2 wins and 3 losses, but that was my first time in a really hyper competitive scene or match. And then several of the classic constructed events during Worlds, pretty similar results: 2 wins, 2 losses, 3 wins, 2 losses, so on and so forth. But let's jump straight into the deck tech video and start going over this deck. So when I went to go build this deck, it's always important to be mindful of your hero and what do they want to do, and also what do you want to do? What's your theme? So with that in mind, obviously for Fang, the main goal for Fang is to get online as quickly as possible, and you do that by generating your 3 fealty tokens, and you can do that through marking the hero and hitting them, or through various effects of your cards. So with that in mind, my deck revolves around the theme of getting online as soon as possible, even if that sacrifices cards that may be very powerful. And also, my deck is essentially zero cost. The only thing that costs anything at any point is the daggers, or if you're using Braveforge bracers. As you can see, I have all my reds, except for Fire and Brimstone, which can be free if you play it right, are zero cost reds. That is intentional to help with strategy, with the economy of the deck when you're going through the game. So essentially, when I look at each card, the primary question I'm asking myself is, what's this card doing for me when I'm offline? And what's this card doing for me when I'm online? So when I do and do not have 3 fealty. So essentially, all of your... We'll go through it one at a time, I guess. So Firm Loyalty, it's probably one of the best cards Fang can have. When you're offline, do everything you can to play this card on your second Draconic Chain Link. It's a free fealty right off the rip. If you're in a turn for whatever situation and you feel like you just have to play this on your first, it may be better, unless you're going to lose a fealty, it may be better just to Arsenal this, hold this to the next turn so you can try to generate that guaranteed fealty. Blaze Headlong is just a good staple. Forego again. Only if you play another red card that turn, but as you can see, the deck is loaded with red cards, so this is not a hard requirement to reach. Blistering Blade, just a strong boost on your second or third Draconic Chain Link. It gives a solid damage. The recent addition to my deck actually is Draco Fire. This slot used to be for Smokeout. Now, recently, in my local meta, a lot of people are playing Warriors at the moment, and some people are playing Guardians and just swinging with their weapons. So Smokeout has lost its value to me in my local meta. It may make its way back in the deck, but essentially what I did like about it was able to mark my opponent on their turn. So kind of lining myself up to try to get that fealty sooner. Or if I'm online, be able to proc a Savior Bloodshed. But anyways, this recently made into the deck because this card has a lot of utility to it. Your next Draconic attack this turn gets +2 and costs 1 less resource to play or activate. While this is in your grave at the start of your turn, you may banish 2 of these cards from your graveyard if you game alive. So essentially, this is great for economy, and it's great for doing like a Fang sidestep. And since it's an instant, you can play it in your reaction phase, and that will still trigger your daggers to where if you played your card this chain link, attack gets +1 and go again. So for example, if you throw your first Obsidian Fire Vein out and your opponent blocks heavy, or they already decide to block one, and you notice they're only been blocking one each turn. You want to notice the patterns of your opponent. They only block one that turn, and you're like, all right, my second swing, they're more likely to block less because I'm going to be eating into whatever their strategy is on their turn. What you can do is you can sidestep them by playing this as an instant, and you're giving your next attack +2, but you'll give your current Fire Vein the go again. Because remember, these don't start with go again. You still have to give the go again. This is similar to what you like to do. You can do this with Pledge Fealty as well on your first dagger. If you're not liking the way that it's turning out, or you're trying to line yourself up for an Infirm Loyalty, for example, you can play these Draconic instances and you can sidestep. Same thing with Tooth of the Dragon. So essentially these 3 cards, so you got 9 of them in the deck, Draco Fire, Pledge Fealty, and Tooth of the Dragon, you can use that Draconic instant to sidestep your first Fire Vein and line up your second one to be the heavier one. Or, you know, if this is a turn where you Fire and Brimstone, which is the next card, good way to segue into that. If you Fire and Brimstone, you can maybe do it on your 3rd or 4th dagger swing. But this is a good staple of the deck. It's amazing art, but it's legendary. You can only have 1. This costs 1 less pay for each kind of chain link you control. So essentially, this can easily become 0 costs on your second chain link. And typically, what happens for me, luckily enough, is I'll Oath of Loyalty first, which has to be played first if you get it. And then on my first dagger swing, I go into Fire and Brimstone. But Fire and Brimstone, you don't have to line it up perfectly. Sometimes the game doesn't allow it. But if you have the flexibility, if you have the tempo and you have control of the game, I think it's best to line this car up, maybe put it in your arsenal, and try to get it. Because what you'll struggle with when you play this card is you have to give 3 daggers go again. So if you have a 4-card hand and you have Fire and Brimstone, if you want this card to be free, you already have to give up 1 card to get that first Draconic chain link going. So this can be played on the second so it can be free. So that means one of your daggers is not going to get the go again and you won't get the full potential of it. So if you really want to get the full potential of it, you want to get that in your arsenal and then have a full hand of hopefully reactions. And you can really give your opponent a good, a bunch of jabs with your daggers. Next card up is for the Dracai. This is a great card just to close with at the end of your dagger swings or your chain link. When this attacks a marked hero, create a fealty token. You have many ways to mark a hero in this deck or with Fang in general with the cards that are available to them. So this is like a free give me. And on occasion, if your opponent lets this hit and they're marked, it can be a double fealty creating event. A lot of times what ends up happening is sometimes they'll be marked, and when an opponent's marked, they're very conscious about Fang not getting his 3 fealties. Because once he gets his 3 fealties, the game has completely changed. And they will try very hard to prevent that and prevent being hit by marked. Well, for the Dracai, sidesteps that. It just creates a fealty because they're marked. And I've done many attacks before chain links where I'm really trying to hit someone, but then I fell for the Dracai at the very end, and it gets me what I need. So moving on to the next card, Hunt's End. This card, its name is kind of self-explanatory. You want to play this towards the end of your hunt or the end of your game, or just when you're online. You can only play this when you have 3 or more fealty tokens, and target daggers get +4. I can't tell you how many times I've actually ended a game with this card. Probably maybe a half a dozen times I've actually ended games with Hunt's Ends, or maybe double Hunt's End, because that +4 with the dagger is going to get you up to 6. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. And then if you play any more reactions on top of that, it could be a very heavy damage turn. The only problem is with this card is when you draw it early when you're offline. There you could put it in Arsenal, but you may lock your Arsenal if you don't get online soon. So if you have 2 fealty, maybe you could put in your Arsenal and sit on it and then use it as soon as you can. Or what you may have to do is you may just have to block with it early on. Or if the situation requires it, you can pitch it. So this way it's at the bottom of your deck and maybe it'll make its way back up towards the end of the game if it could last that long. Imperial Intent, just a good reaction. It's free pretty much no matter what, because you're going to play this on a dagger, which is your first chain link, so it's free. It'll get your dagger to 3, it blocks for 2. But you're going to notice I have a lot of cards that just make it to where I'm going to guarantee to swing with my dagger almost every single turn. Just the pure amount of Draconic chain links. So I made this deck with the idea that I want to swing with my dagger twice every single turn. And reason for that is not only damage, but the boots. These boots are preventing 1 damage. Valiant Dynamos are preventing 1 damage every single turn. I've had my opponents count how much damage I block throughout a game, and it ends up being 1 damage per turn. And that particular game went on for 8 turns. I blocked a total of 8 damage from this one piece of equipment. You get a crazy economy out of that. So with this deck set up to swing twice, and not only, your opponent gets thrown off by dagger because they know the damage is always on the back end. It's almost never on the front end with Fang and with warriors in general. So they're constantly having to make decisions on how much they want to block. So it's always good to throw up both those daggers, make them have that dilemma, and then you'll have your boots to block on your turn. But moving on to the next card, going into Long Whisker Loyalty. For each kind of chain linking control, choose one. This card is great flexibility. You get on the second dagger most of the time, and what typically happens is you're going to want to give an additional dagger swing. Let's go back to the online offline thing. If you're offline, you want to probably do the additional dagger swing with the mark maybe, or the +2 with an additional dagger swing. It depends on the situation. If they're unmarked and you have the resources available to you, so if you pitched a blue that turn, right? So let's say you pitched any of your blues, you'll have 3 resources. First swing goes in, you react with it like someone with Imperial Intent. Your second swing goes in, then you do your Long Whisker Loyalty, and you do target dagger gets a swing additional time, and when it hits a hero this turn, it marks them, so you can get that mark going. Now, if they're already marked, you can just do the +2 and do an additional swing, just to have more opportunities to put damage on your opponent to capitalize on that mark, or maybe remark them. It's just, this card has a lot of flexibility. You just have to see what the situation is and adjust. Oath of Loyalty. This card, it makes things fun, I guess. It can only be played first on your turn, so it's a little rigid. And to add to that rigidity, when this card is played until the end of your turn, you may only play cards that are draconic. So if you have a Scar Tissue, Twist and Turn, even if you want to react with Glint of the Quicksilver, or you want to play, let's say, Save Your Bloodshed, you cannot, because none of them are draconic. So it does add some rigidity to your turn, but it's solid. It's 4 no costs with Go Again. So just 4 damage up front. And then you go into your double dagger swings, right? So when you're online, this is just pure damage. And almost all of these reactions and instances in here are draconic. No problem. And I've noticed with this deck in general, I tend to have a surplus of fealties. And typically what happens, once you get your 3rd fealty, your opponent in their mind says, okay, the game has changed. I am no longer going to expend so many resources preventing fealties. I'm marked. Am I going to let damage? They're just thinking about how they can win the game by either doing damage or doing whatever the strategy of their deck is. They're going to focus more on their strategy instead of trying to counter your strategy. So once I notice I get 3 fealty, they'll just climb. I've had games where I've gotten up to 6, 9, just ridiculous amount of fealties, because once I get to 3, and if I get to 3 early enough, the opponent just gives up on carrying on preventing fealties. And when that happens, when you get that surplus, just start popping them. Pop them and make a red scar tissue draconic, and then you could play Oath of Loyalty and a red scar tissue. Or you could play an Oath of Loyalty, break your chain link, and then make a Save Your Bloodshed draconic, and then play it that way. There's a lot of flexibility. You just gotta be creative, be mindful of the state of the game. So Oath of Loyalty, I think it's fun. It may be, I like the challenge of using the card. But if that rigidity is not for you, there's definitely a lot of cards at Fang's disposal that you can replace this with. Pledge Fealty is just straight up create a fealty token. And it's also great, as I mentioned earlier, for sidestepping a dagger. You could play that in your reaction at instant speed to give this the +1 and the go again to then go into your next dagger swing. So sometimes if somebody blocks a lot up front, especially at the end game, because if your opponent's down to about 6 life, they kind of have to overblock with Fang. They're kind of in the Fang, what I'm called death cycle, essentially, where at any moment we have the cards to kill them, or they have to assume we do because of the amount of reactions that we have. So if they overblock on the first swing, pledge fealty, and then you just load up your second swing or your third swing with a bunch of reactions. So good sidestep card, but also just can't go wrong with just generating a fealty. Save Your Bloodshed. Your next dagger tag gets +4, and next time you hit a marked hero with a dagger this turn, draw a card, go again. So drawing card, amazing. There's not a whole lot. Actually, this is, I think, the only card in this deck that really allows you just to straight up draw a card. Besides, sink below, but you have to give up a card to gain a card. But nonetheless, there's a lot of ways to mark with Fang. You can do the Searing Gaze. You can do the Scar Tissues. And before, and if you choose to play it, you can get the marks out with the smoke out. But it's just great. And then, your dagger swing comes in for 5, which is a pretty high number on its own. And then you're going to do a reaction to it. So if you play Save Your Bloodshed, you've done your City and Fire Vein for 5, immediately go into something, I don't know, just generic, like Imperial Intent, all of a sudden it's an 8 damage dagger. And if they're marked, if you got everything lined up, they have to block it out, or you draw a card and you're going to dish out more damage on your next swing. So next one's Scar Tissue. Non-Draconic. It's one of the second non-Draconic card I'm showing you. The first one being Save Your Bloodshed. But target dagger gets +3, and when it's hits hero, mark them. Just solid 3 damage to your dagger. And if you hit them, mark them. And that mark, again, being a thing that allows you to generate fealty or set up a Save Your Bloodshed turn. Just be creative with it. And if you need that go again, what you can do is, I've done this multiple times, you swing with your dagger, play any of your instants, Draco Flyer, Pledge Fealty, Tooth of the Dragon, with the Scar Tissue in the same reaction. So then your current dagger is going to go up to, is still going to get that benefit of the +1 for a Draconic card and the go again. So it's going to be 2 go again because of these instants, the instant. And then you get the Scar Tissue. So it's going to be 5 damage on hit mark. And it still has the go again. So you can essentially pair this up with a Draconic card and compound the effects and still get that mark off. Searing Gaze. Target dagger gets +2, and if you control 2 more Draconic chain links, when it's hits hero, mark them. Again, try to line up to your second dagger. You hit them, you mark them. Again, fealty generating thing when you hit a marked opponent, so you want to get them marked as much as possible. And even if you're offline, still want to get your opponent marked, because you never know when you're going to draw into that Save Your Bloodshed, which can make a really strong turn if you get that draw off. Sink Below. I don't think I really need to explain Sink Below, but when I first made this deck, I had the intention of it having decent block, being a little bit more mid-rangey than most Fang decks are. Key being I also had the smokeouts in here, and at one point I was thinking about doing Fate for Scenes to kind of get that extra block in there. But over time, I've kind of morphed away from that a little bit, but I still think I block a little bit more than most Fangs would, and we'll get into that more as we get into our blues and yellows. But great card for trying to fix your hand, especially if you have a hand where you don't have a blue or a yellow. So if you're offline, sync helps fix your hand to where you'll have some pitch. Whether you want to, sync, especially a hunt's end. So if you're offline and you got sync below, sync that hunts, and hopefully get one of your blue or yellows so you can pitch for your dagger swings. So just overall hand fixing. Tooth of the Dragon, just a great card. Again, good for sidestepping. If your dagger is being blocked up front and you just want to avoid it, it just lines up the next attack. And you can also get creative with this card because this can also be used for the Dracai. So sometimes at my second dagger swing, I'll do Tooth of the Dragon into extra powered for the Dracai because it's your next draconic attack. So you can do that also with Blaze Headlong. So you can do a 7 Blaze Headlong. Just a very flexible card and works with most cards in the deck. And again, if you did use it into, actually no, I was thinking about, I guess if you use it, it's overcrowded, you could pop up Fealty and make that draconic, but that's always an option. But there's a lot of creative ways you can use the instance in this deck. So we're going to get into our yellows. Running 6 yellows. And what I like about yellows with Fang is when you're offline, you only need 2 resources to get both those dagger swings. And again, that meets the theme of my deck. I want to swing my daggers every 2 times because I want to reset my boots, and I want my opponent to constantly have that dilemma of what they're going to do when blocking both these daggers. And again, a lot of these cards, such as Searing Gaze, the effect doesn't come in until the second Draconic Chain Link. Same with Affirm Loyalty. Both 2 cards that help with gaining fealties. So yellows, you only really need, when you're offline, you only need that 2 resources to do it. However, the trade-off is, and I'll get to with the blues, is you won't have that 3rd resource. And that 3rd resource is good when it comes to grains, but we'll get into that in a little bit because I want to stay on topic for these. So Scar Tissue, same reasons as the red Scar Tissue. You can mark, you can get extra damage. When you're offline, depending if you already have another pitch-worthy card in your hand, so another blue or yellow, you can use this to mark the enemy. If you're online, it's just extra damage and you can mark them. Why not blues here? Because the yellows are going to give me a little bit more damage. So when I'm online, I have more damage potential than if I was online with a blue. Same with the twist and turn. So, and also, before I forget, I try to have all these be 3 blocks because these are going to end up being blocking cards too when you're offline. Essentially, because part of my idea, again, was to be a little bit more block capable with this deck, especially when it comes to like some sort of on hit that's really going to mess up my strategy or is going to drastically benefit my opponent. I did want to have the ability to block key damage. Keyword being key. You need to be able to identify when your opponent is presenting some sort of damage or some sort of effect that is going to drastically increase their advantage or drastically decrease your ability to do what you want to do next turn. So even Scar Tissue is good for a lot of reasons, which is why I give the excuse of letting it have the 2 damage, but all my blues are 3 damage. Overcrowded isn't 3 damage, but we'll get into that in a minute. It technically will always be 3 damage if you're decent Fang, unless it's your first 1 or 2 turns, it'll be 3 damage. But nonetheless, twist and turn, and circling back, get off that soapbox. Going back to twist and turn, when the next attack this turn gets +3, and when this hits, you may attack with it an additional time this turn. So right off the rip, your dagger is coming in for 4. And then if it hits, again, you're gonna do a reaction to your dagger. So it's gonna be coming in for more than 4. Likely it's gonna be coming in for 7. Um, and then when it hits, you can attack with additional turn. So you can have a 3 dagger turn on a turn where the twist and turn hits. And again, you can pair this card with your instances if you want to then go wider on your swings with your reactions and have your reactions and stuff more towards the back end. So again, when you're online with this card, it's got great potential when you're online. 3 swings plus 3 damage. That's great. And when you're offline, it's good pitch and it's got good block. And it's got good block even when you're online. And again, if you identified that key moment where you really need to block, you can block with this. So over to Glint. Pretty much every warrior card has this. If you're offline, great pitch. If you're online, you can, as soon as your opponent blocks with something from their hand, you play this down. And again, actually, this is also can be used for sidestepping. Sidestepping your first dagger attack and give your first dagger go again. And then if there are any defending heroes defend with a card from their hand this turn, draw a card. So it replaces itself. So if you're online, you're like, oh man, I got a blue. It's not gonna do a whole lot of damage. Well, see if you can draw bait your opponent to draw defend with a card out of their hand. You play this card down, it replaces itself, and then you can sidestep your dagger, and you can play all sorts of reactions on your second dagger or another draconic card that you play down. So just a great card. Overcrowded. Overcrowded works really well for Fang because you're essentially, I've almost always had a fealty by second or third turn, at least 1 or 2. So this card will always be a 3 block, and if you end up doing grains, it can be a 4 block. It can be essentially a bootleg D-react. I mean, you don't play it in the reaction stage, but nonetheless, you can block with this as a 4 block. But when this attacks or defends, it gets +1 attack and +1 defense for each different named among Aurora tokens in the arena. So as Fang, you can have Vigors out and Fealties out. And I forgot to go with this with Glenn, but for all the blues, as we go into the blue categories, when we pitch them, you can swing with your dagger for your first dagger, and you swing with your second dagger, and then you have that third resource. On one of your dagger hits, you want to activate Grains. If you're offline, you want to activate Grains and get that vigor for your next turn. You may be like, well, if on that first hit, why not pay that extra 1 and activate Bracers and get the +1? You could. However, I found that +1 to be less utility and less value to me than the vigor, because many times I've had that vigor carry over, and on my next hand, I draw a 4-card red hand. And that extra vigor is going to help a lot because now I can swing with my dagger, react, pitch only 1 red instead of 2, and play 2 reactions to that dagger. It allows greater flexibility and recycling of resources to grains that third resource to give your next turn the greater possibility of success than to try and be more aggressive and maybe even greedy by just giving your next attack a measly +1. That's in my experience for extra resources in general with the blues. Now, if you really like that, and it worked very well for me when I had more blues in this deck, switch out maybe the Twist and Turn, the Scar Tissue, or some other card you don't like in here, or like the Oath of Loyalty, and get more blues in there. But that recycle helps a lot, especially it gives you greater flexibility into that next turn. So yeah, offline, pitch, block. When you're online, it's good for block. Typically when I get it, when I'm online, I don't really use it for attack. It'll come in for 2, maybe 3. Typically, I get more value by defending my life, my resource of life, by blocking 3 to 4 than taking 2 to 3 from my enemy. In a, like a purely mathematical sense, you get more value out of it blocking. Um, so yeah, going into Relentless Pursuit. Again, 3 block, blue, great pitch. Mark opposing hero. If you attack with them this turn, put this on the bottom of the owner's deck. So when I'm online, sometimes I'll play this in combination with Save Your Bloodshed, and they set themselves up. If both these cards are in your hand, it's a free setup. If you're offline, you can play this card to mark your opponent to try to get that fealty. But you're only going to do that if you have another yellow or blue in your hand, because you still need to pitch for your daggers when you're offline. Otherwise, it's probably going to end up being pitch, and you're going to rely on your other cards, such as your scar tissues or your searing gazes, to create that mark or that fealty for you. But then also, and a little bonus on top, if you attack this turn, put this on the bottom of the owner's deck, so it recycles itself. So that is all of the cards in the deck. I just realized I didn't really go over the gear, but it's pretty standard, I think. You have the Brave 4 braces, just good block, good ability. Crown, fixing your hand essentially. If you're offline and you have an all red hand and you really want to get some pitch, you can use it to block. Or if you're online and you have more blues or yellows in your hand than you want, you can use that and hopefully get a red card so you can have more damage potential. Grains. Grains is great for whenever a weapon attack you control hits. You may pay 1 if you do create a vigor token. It's great for recycling. Like I said earlier, if you're playing that blue or that yellow, well, if yellow, you're going to be swinging twice, but good for recycling resources over to your next turn. And if you get online, let's say you pitch a blue, and on your first swing you get online, so you have 2 floating resources, you can go ahead and activate this on that swing that you got online with, and then activate it on your next swing, and then you can kind of start a recycling campaign of resources turn after turn on your hits if your opponent keeps letting you hit them. For whatever reason, you may need that resource. Maybe you're playing a Rune Blade and you swap out to a Null Rune Hood. You have those resources kind of like standing by. And then Dynamo is just very important, very staple. You're blocking with this essentially every single turn, and just be very mindful if you're a new Fang player to constantly at the end of your turn, if you attack your enemy 2 times with weapons, to remove your -1. Most people are cool and they'll let you do it, but if you're in a very hyper competitive scene, that may change. So just be very mindful of resetting your boots and using your boots consistently every opportunity you kind of get. Going into the inventory, this is kind of circumspect. The only thing I think is definitely for sure is Null Rune Hood, in case you're going up against Arcane. Kabuto, in case you're going against a fellow warrior. When it's defense at the end of turn, opponents can't attack with weapons. Also good against brutes as well. And the rest of it, this is kind of just from my personal experience in my local meta. There's some people playing Arachne, so cut from the same cloth is good. It's also generally a good card. You get to see a good intel card. Target opponent reveals their hand. If an attacking reaction card is revealed this way, mark them. So if you're playing another warrior or anyone that does attack reactions, you get a free mark. Your next dagger this turn gets +4, but also you get to see their hand, so that's intel. And then from that, you can kind of plan and strategize a little bit for that turn and the following turn based off of what you saw. Hunt to the Ends of Wrath. When Sax Arachne, mark them. Again, easy, free mark, only if you're playing Arachne. And if this is attacking a marked hero, it gets +2. So it just instantly goes up to a 4-go again. That's great. But again, it's like very niche, only against that particular hero. So only if Arachne is like in your local meta or in the game's meta, I guess, at the moment. That's all you got. It's a yellow 3 defense reaction. So again, you can actually use this for pitch along with just using it as a defense reaction. And in the chance that they're defending with an attack with 2 or less power, uh, you get to draw a card. Sworn to Vengeance, just a good blue for Fang. Your next dagger attack this turn gets +1, and when this hits you, hero mark them. So this is an action. So this is going to be loaded in front. So you would be playing this in front of your dagger, which means your opponent's really going to see this coming. And they may, because of that, they're going to put more extra effort into blocking the dagger. So like you maybe, that's why the Searing Gaze is going to be better because it's a reaction. You're playing on the back end. So your opponent already dedicated their block. So your actions are going to be front loaded and they're going to see it coming. So that's for Save Your Bloodshed. Opponent's going to see that coming. You played that first. Then you're going into your dagger swing. So they know if they want to prevent you from drawing a card, they're going to have to prevent themselves from being hit if they're marked. Here's your fealties. If you destroy this next card you play, your turn is Draconic. Good if you need to turn any non-Draconic card Draconic, especially if you play Oath of Loyalty that turn, or if you want to give your daggers the go again and the +1 off of something like a Scar Tissue. And then Vigor, that's coming from your Grains, and then your Mark card. Here's some maybes. You know, Twist and Turn's just really strong, so I have all colors of it in there. Smoke Out, which is what I was using because at the time, I think like Assassins and like Syndra were very popular, so that I was effectively using this card more, but it's kind of dwindled. I've kind of teetered with Loyalty Beyond the Grave. It's a 3-block. You get two of them in your graveyard. You can draw a card at the start of your turn. So if you're lining yourself up, and you know you have a card in your arsenal, at the start of your turn, you can just like, hey, I got 2 of these. Draw another card, and you can like try to have a really powerful turn. But it seems very situational, right? Because you need to have 2 of those in the graveyard already. Fate for Scenes, and then I think about it, the Endear Devotion. Target dagger gets +3, and it's a reaction. If you control 2 or more Draconic Chain Links, create a fealty token. So it's essentially a 1 power stronger Affirm Loyalty. However, it has the 1 cost for the pitch. So it breaks my personal theme of keeping essentially every card I want to play free. Every single one of these cards, except for Fire and Brimstone, but we talked about that, is free to play. The only thing that costs anything in this deck is the daggers when you're offline. You could put this in your deck, and again, because it creates fealty, and it's all about, you really want to get fealty as fast as possible, because that is when you start winning the game. However, if you were to play this card, I think you would have to get rid of the yellows and get more blues, because you will need 3 pitch to make this work. You will need to pitch for your first dagger to get that first chain link going, and then you need to pitch for your second dagger just to swing it, and then you got to pitch for the Endear Devotion to have the card play. So it's going to cost 3 pitch to meet essentially the criteria of control 2 or more Draconic Chain Links for a fealty token. The only way that's not true is if you played Oath of Loyalty, and then you win into your first dagger swing costing 1, and then you played Endear Devotion costing 2. So you could pitch a yellow, play Oath, pay 1 for Fire Vein, and then pay 2 for Deer. But the thing is, what's the chances of that happening, right? You only got 3 Oaths in your deck. You're not going to play, where is it at? You're not going to play Blaze Headlong first, because you need another red card played already for it to have go again. So if you play it first, your turn's essentially over. So that's the only situation where that would properly line up. Unless you introduce other Draconic attacks that have go again into the deck. But I wouldn't advise it. But yeah, that is my Fang deck, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I find it to be there's a lot of ways to be creative with it and trying to get marks off. Don't be afraid to break your chain link, unless, be mindful, some of these cards required stuff to happen on the second chain. But yeah, hopefully this inspires somebody to make a really strong Fang deck. Maybe if you want, you can copy this one, try it out, see how it goes. But we're hoping to do more videos like this in the future. Again, this is the breakdown of my Fang deck tech, the history, the philosophy of me going into it, how I play it. And if you want a deeper dive into any part of this, just leave a comment and I'll try to respond the best I can. We got a couple of videos already of me playing this deck, or a very slightly altered version of this deck, at some of the armories on the channel. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Please, if you can, leave us a like, subscribe, and remember, try to have fun playing Flesh and Blood, and don't always take yourself too serious. This is Jeremy from One Intellect.